Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, welcome to the end of month Q&A video for September 2022. And things have really been picking up on YouTube, and this tends to happen towards the end of the year. The closer you get to Christmas, the more views go up and the more comments come in. So I've got loads of your comments to get through this month, and I dare say it's going to be even busier in the coming months. So who is up first in September? As always, Enrico Palazzo. Hi Enrico, great to have you here. May I suggest a few mods for your MIJ Telejo? New neck with reverse headstock, more tension on lower strings and easier to bend higher strings. P90 in the neck, or reverse angled bridge pickup. In your case, get a right-handed bridge so you get the pickup angled reverse. So that white MIJ Tele, which has been somewhat gathering dust since I got the Ron Kern Barnbuster. I don't actually have the white Telly here at the moment. I haven't sold it. It is with a manufacturer who is making some modifications to it for me. And no, sorry Enrico, it's none of those three. Now I'm not sure of what the time scale of this transformation is going to be, but there will be a full video documenting the change in conjunction with the manufacturer. It might be in October, I would guess probably in November, but there will be a full-length sort of feature video coming, taking that guitar from its stock 52 reissue MIJ spec through to something quite interesting and fairly unique and a lot more exciting than what it was before. So bear with me, that video will be coming soon, but I don't even have the white Telly here to show you at the moment because it is away having some work done. Andy Demos, excellent demo. Now I included this because Andy Demos is of course Andy Martin of Pro Guitar Shop and Reverb and of course Andy Demos. So I very much doubt you're watching the end of month Q&A, Andy, but hello if you are. And it's great to have you drop by and comment on a pedal that bears your name. Now the pedal in question is of course this one here, the new PastFX PX65, which is a recreation of the old DoD chorus. And it has the Dave and Andy switch in the middle. Dave is standard output jack configuration. The Andy mode reverses the top and the bottom jack. So if you're using just one, you can get the sound of the top out of the bottom and vice versa, because they are slightly different. That's just how this pedal is. But great to have you here, Andy, and thank you for checking out the video. Also on this pedal, Jack Nance 22. The Telly has a very nice clear tone. Sounds excellent with the chorus pedal. Another winner by PastFX for certain. Looking forward to seeing which chorus makes the cut on your next holiday time pedalboard build. This really is an amazing sounding chorus pedal. I was using it just this morning in a separate video and it was sounding absolutely glorious. So yes, I haven't actually planned out what the Christmas 2022/2023 pedalboard build is going to be yet. If indeed there is going to be one, I'm not sure. I literally haven't given it any thought. But this is a contender to go on there as the chorus pedal. It really is a special sounding thing. ABC DEF. Great demo, Joe. Love the tones. I have the PastFX CE1 clone. Does the PX65 also do this crunch preamp thing like the CE1? How would you describe the difference between the CE1 and PX65? So two questions there. Firstly, no, it doesn't do the crunchy preamp thing. This pedal doesn't have a sort of standalone preamp in it like the CE1 does, and that's what gives the CE1 its sound, that kind of gristly, gritty preamp thing. This doesn't have that, so this is a much kind of cleaner sounding chorus overall. And I think that kind of goes some way to answering your second question as well. To me, this is a brighter sounding chorus. The CE1 is very kind of thick and soupy and warm, which is why everybody loves it. And that's in part down to the preamp circuit on the front end. This is more like your kind of CE2, CE3 small clone type thing. It's a more stereotypical 80s chorus effect, I think is the best way of wording it. The CE1's kind of its own thing. This kind of falls in nicely with those other pedals. So you don't get any kind of clipping out of this pedal like you would with the CE1, but it's a bit more kind of overtly jangly, I suppose. Sebastian. I find it extremely difficult to believe that something that was designed 60 years ago with outdated materials and manufacturing processes is better than pickups made using 6 decades of technological advancement. And this is on the throwback SLE 101 PAFs. They're not better. is the honest truth. The old ones aren't better, the new ones aren't better. They're just different. Now, the purpose of the throwback SLE 101s and any kind of vintage spec PAF is chasing after the sound of 60 years ago. So it's for people like me who have grown up listening to guitar sounds from the 50s and the 60s, and they're trying to get as close to that as possible because we haven't really moved on. But of course, modern humbuckers, they are made using different materials, different manufacturing techniques, different magnets, different designs overall, different DC resistances. They're just different. Doesn't mean one's better or worse than the other. If you're playing gent metal music and you want a 18K bare knuckle nail bomb or something, that's worlds apart from a vintage spec PAF. Doesn't mean one's better or worse than the other. They're just for different styles of music, different personal preferences. So yes, you're absolutely right. You know, it's not to say that the old ones are better or the new ones are better. They're just different. Alex Stone accidentally bought split shafts for my telly when my volume went out, threw it in anyways and crimped the split shaft together exactly like you said it would. Already ordered the solid replacement. And this is in the POTS 101 video, and I said that if you try and bolt a knob onto a split shaft pot, you'll just sort of fold it together. That does very often happen, but there are ways around that, and I've certainly used most of these in the past. You can buy adapters. I didn't know this until recently, but if you have a split shaft pot, you can get like a sort of brass ring that kind of sits over the top and basically converts it into a solid shaft. So that's one way of doing it. I've seen it done before where people take kind of very thin slices of wood, like veneer, like little fragments of veneer, and kind of shove them down the split in the middle of the pot, and then you can bolt onto it and it gives that sort of void more rigidity and stops it going together. But the other way that's probably a lot easier than both of those is when you are lining up the knob and screwing it on, if you line up the screw with kind of the end on perspective of the pot and where the split is and bolt it kind of into the split, it won't fold it together because you have all that kind of strength. If you turn it 90 degrees and sort of bolt it onto the side of the split, then you will sort of fold it in because there's no metal in the middle to actually have any structure, so it'll just kind of crimp together. If you turn it 90 degrees and put the screw like dead onto the splits, like sort of lengthways, generally you can get it to work. It's not an ideal solution. If you can get hold of some split shaft pots, then that is a much better way of doing it. But there are little workarounds if you buy the wrong sort of shaft pot for your particular guitar. Paul L. Ewing, and I'm still not sure if I'm pronouncing your surname right, Paul, so please tell me if it's Ewing or Ewing or Ewing, whatever. The amp was okay. I just could not stop thinking about the R pedal, lol. And there's another comment of a similar vein here on the same video of my Cornell Romany Plus tweed amp. Nice video, Joe. Just pre-ordered the Reverend based on your review. Have you tried or reviewed any other Decibelix pedals? So I put up a demo of a very nice hand-wired amp and straight away got 2 questions about a Decibelix pedal. And the question in pedal, the R pedal, is this one, the Reverend, which is a like-for-like replica of the old Bixonic Expandora made by Guillem at Decibelix over in Spain. So yes, these are now on the market. You can go out and buy these. This is a prototype one that was kind of advanced of production. I believe, I could be wrong on this, the initial batch, which was a fairly sizable batch, sold out in 30 minutes when they finally went on the market. So they're very sought after, these pedals. And in terms of other Decibelix pedals, yes, I've got the Golden Horse on my pedal board, which is pretty much regarded as being the best Klon clone out there. It's spoken about in the same brackets as like the Centura and the Mythical Overdrive and the Ryra. But generally in those very heated threads on the gear page about which is the best clone, the Decibelix seems to kind of edge the other ones out. It is absolutely astonishing. I've not tried the heavy metal, the HM2 pedal, the Angry Swede I think it is. Not my sort of pedal whatsoever, but I am curious about it. I'd love to give it a go. I think it kind of does the one sound and that's all it does. And it's not my sort of sound at all, but it would be a huge amount of fun playing around with that kind of chainsaw-y death metal sound. I'd like to have a go at that, even though it would be terrible. Paul Reno. Hi Joe, thanks for this video. This is by far the best demo video of a Romany amp along with the one Johan Sedgborn did on the 10. This really fills the gap, well played, well recorded and great music. Well, thank you, Paul. I didn't realise that Johan had done a video of the Romany 10 and I went and checked it out. It's a great video. And just to kind of give Johan a shout out, if you're ever after vintage amps and vintage pre-roller greenback speakers, Johan is your guy. He's absolutely brilliant. He's really mastered the vertical video format, and it's one of those things that if you explain it, it sounds a bit rubbish, but when you see it, it's amazing. Where he has his screen kind of split into three, and he has like himself talking on one side, a static picture of the amp in the middle, and then like a boat going along a river on the other one, something completely random. But it's really cool. He has his own unique style, and the tones on his channel are ridiculously good. So go and check out Johan Sedgborn. He really is like a font of all knowledge of vintage amps and, well, anything vintage really. Coda S. You've got to turn it up to hear the chips, says Josh Scott, in reference to people using a Klon Centaur $6,000 pedal as a boost or light distortion. With all due respect, watching this video was a waste of time. Well, I'm sorry to hear it was a waste of time first and foremost, but I think I know exactly the comment you're referring to on that. And Josh was talking about the Klon, absolutely, and he did say you've got to turn it up to hear ... But he was referring to the diodes rather than the chips. Now, a Klon Centaur does have op amps in it, but the whole, well, one of the biggest debates around the Klon Centaur, there are many, is the mythical diodes, the 1/6 something or other Ns, whatever it was. They're like the black striped glass diodes. And what Josh was referring to in that comment, I believe, was the fact that the gain control on a Klon Centaur, it's not a typical gain control. The gain on a Klon Centaur is fixed. It's always kind of flat out. What the gain control does is like a dual concentric blend control. So all the way to the left, you're getting just the clean signal, and all the way to the right, you're getting the fully distorted signal through the diodes. And what he was referring to with that comment was people tend to run clones in the clean boost mode with the gain all the way down, and then they talk about mythical diodes. But when the gain is all the way down on a Klon, the diodes aren't even in the circuit. You don't hear them whatsoever. So I believe what he was referring to with that comment was you have to turn the gain on the Klon up to hear the diodes that are the subject of so much debate. So I think you might be getting a little bit mixed up with op amps and diodes in that comment. But anyway, I'm sorry to hear the video was a waste of time, but you win some, you lose some. Walter Risotto. Really nice, except for the mastering mod, methinks, especially if you leave the bridge cover on, which I do. Get an R to trapeze kit from Winfield in the US. It'll match the knobs better. So this is on my kind of Rickenbacker 330, where I did all the mods and kind of did the last video first. And I put the Capri style knobs on there, and I had a switch with the sort of vintage high pass capacitor, some old school toaster pickup swapping out the high gains, but I left the original tailpiece on there. And the tailpiece on Rickenbackers is one of the few things that really annoys me. Not because it's not good, but because with left-handed Rickenbackers, they don't make a left-handed R tailpiece. They just bolt it on upside down and it looks ridiculous. So I had thought about getting a trapeze-style tailpiece because I've designed my 330 to look like an old 50s Capri. And back in the day, they used kind of angled trapeze tailpieces rather than the R's. So I thought about doing it, but I thought, A, it's a lot of money to achieve very little apart from pure cosmetics, but also it will be upside down as well, and that will annoy me too. But I did go on to the Winfield Vintage website on Walter's tip-off, and I found that they make a trapeze-style tailpiece for left-handed Rickenbackers, which nobody else does. So this guitar now has a Winfield trapeze tailpiece, which is the correct way up. So thank you, Walter, for tipping me off about Winfield Vintage. I'd never heard of them. I've now got the trapeze on my Rickenbacker, and I'm very happy with it. But also thank you to Winfield Vintage for finally making a left-handed tailpiece for a Rickenbacker rather than an upside-down trapeze, or even worse, the upside-down R, which just shows that it was a complete afterthought and they didn't care enough about left-handed players to make a proper tailpiece for us. So thank you to both of you for tipping me off on that, and I'm very happy with my new Winfield Vintage trapeze tailpiece. MK Win. To be honest, instead of all that, I would have went right to the toaster pickups first. I've never heard a demo of a Rick with those newer pickups that sounded right, and everyone that I've heard with toasters, I've thought, there it is. So this was kind of the first of the mod videos of my Rickenbacker. As I just said, I've released like the final finished product first, and I'm releasing the mod videos kind of in series. Now, You're absolutely right that the stock high gain pickups that most Rickenbackers come with nowadays, they don't have that classic sort of thin, jangly, chimey sound. They just don't. They have ceramic magnets, they're high DC resistance, they're dark, they sound a bit like a telly, to be honest. But the reason I did the electronics first was, it's for a few reasons, really. Firstly, because, as I just said, the vast majority of people with Rickenbackers have high gain pickups in them. So going from the modern spec electronics to the vintage spec, doing that with the high gain pickups in that video, it will be so much more relevant to so many more people doing it with the high gains in there. But also because I wanted to see whether a cheaper mod would get anywhere near that old school Ricky sound. Now, as it turned out, it didn't really, but I would rather do the cheap mod first and see whether spending £20 on a few new pots could revolutionise the sound of a guitar rather than forking out for £200+ on a set of hand-wound toasters. So yes, the toasters are in that mod series. They're the last one. And yes, they did make the biggest difference and they gave me that sound. So you're absolutely right that going straight to the toasters would have given me much more of a classic sound than swapping the electronics. But I'm doing it kind of in order of severity, as it were, and invasiveness and expenditure as well. So don't worry, the video comparing the high gains to the hand-wound toasters is coming. Enrico Palazzo again. It sounded cooler with the cap on, Joe, and this is the high pass capacitor that I've put in on a switch on my Rickenbacker. What about putting a three-way switch so you have the bypass setting, this value of cap, and another value of your choice? Basically a variant of the Gretsch three-way switch / mud switch. You could do that, but to be completely honest, the fact that I've got a switch in there anyway is more than I would usually do. I tend to kind of give myself as little tweakability as possible. It's one of the reasons I don't like push-pull pots, because I always find, as well, rather as if you're using a guitar as a studio tool, you need access to every tone under the sun on one guitar. Brilliant, go crazy with the push-pulls and the toggle switches and coil splits and everything. But for me, when I've got more than a couple of options of sound on the guitar beyond a pickup selector, I find myself just playing with things. I don't play the instrument and play music. I'm just flicking switches arbitrarily because they're there, and I get so distracted by that I don't actually play the instrument for what it is. So, I mean, the reason that switch is on there is A, because I want to ditch the blend control because I wasn't using it, so I had a great big hole there that needs something, but also because I really like the sound of the Rickenbacker without the capacitor, and I really like the sound of the Rickenbacker with the capacitor, but I didn't like either enough to hardwire it over the other. I kind of wanted both options. That's why I've got a two-way switch in there. Going to 3 or 4 or whatever, I wouldn't use it. I would just be sat there flicking a switch rather than playing a really nice Rickenbacker. So I'll probably stick with that two-way switch, but thank you for the suggestion, Enrico. Do-it-yourself musician. My 1992 330 sounds incredibly dark and muddy. All of the pots measure at 250k or less. I bought some VI pots for it several months ago, but I'm yet to install them. Thanks for clearing up a lot of it for me. I personally like the sound without the cap. I don't mind the lacquered board either, but my frets are very small. I think changing to a bigger fret wire will also help. I do have to say, the frets, now that I'm kind of looking out for this a lot more than I used to, the frets on the Rickenbacker, the fret work and the fret job, it's not the best. You get something like the Ron Kern Barnbuster and every fret is just perfect. There are a few parts on that where the frets aren't completely level and you get a few buzzers just because the frets aren't actually kind of leveled properly, and it's not wear, that's how it came from the factory. But refretting a Rickenbacker is an absolute disaster zone because you basically have to strip all the lacquer off the fretboard because you can't refret over the top of a ridge of lacquer and it'll just splinter and it's a real mess. So I don't want to get it refretted, but yeah, the fretwork on my Rickenbacker isn't fantastic out of all the guitars I own. 250k all round or less is very low for a Rickenbacker, especially with the high gain pickups, which I'm guessing you've got in yours. So the VI pots, I'm guessing you've got 280ks because they're 10% overvalued, so they do give you a little bit of extra to the top end. But try the vintage wiring spec, which is, if you're using VI pots, 280ks for the volume controls and 500ks for the tone controls. Go to that because that will give you even more kind of brightness out of your guitar. So if it's noticeably dark and it's really bugging you, you could try going a little bit more extreme than just going up to 250Ks or 280Ks all round. You could always experiment with 500s, but yeah, 250Ks all round is pretty low for a Rickenbacker. And a big comment here from Daco Roman. Thank you for your further insights. This is a response to a comment that I left, Daco. Yeah, I think a certain point is definitely about splitting hairs. Interestingly, I currently have Wildwood spec underwound Alnico 8 custom, is that 8 custom buckers in my Wildwood R7. They are super telly on steroids to my ears, but I want to try a high quality unpotted set of PAFs that in fact are a touch more PAF-ish than telly-ish, but it still sound telly-ish with the volume rolled off a bit. Oh, the never-ending madness. So from what I'm hearing, I'm heavily leaning towards the standard spec Montes. My next decision is covered or uncovered. I'm almost afraid that uncovered will be a tad too bright though. Anyway, your reviews have been absolutely the most helpful I've found yet. The other set I was considering was the Doyle Coils True Clones, but they are too pricey and don't seem to sound much better than the Montes. I may also go for Montes wiring harness as well for the full Monty effect. The Montes PAFs are some of the finest PAF pickups I've played at any price point, even comparing them to PAFs that retail for double, if not more. The Montes are just a fantastic option. The main reason I included this comment was the idea of buying a set of covered or uncovered PAFs. Personally, I prefer the Montes with covers on in all the guitars I've tried them in over the years. I would buy your PAFs with covers, personally. You can always remove them. If you've got a soldering iron and a razor blade, you can remove the covers. If you buy them without covers, you then haven't got any covers to fit on them. So I would tend to suggest buying covered pickups, and then you can experiment with taking them off if you want more high end. But you can do things with pot values. You can go, in my Les Paul, I use kind of 700, 800, 900K pots, so they're even more top end through rather than the stock 500s. So you can do bits of trickery with that. 50s wiring is another good one to play around with. But yes, if you're going after a really good set of PAF pickups, you really cannot go wrong with the Montes. And the same with the Montes wiring looms. They are just next level in terms of quality. They're super neat, and the caps look amazing. And yeah, you really can't go wrong with anything Montes make. Dave Mahan, excellent as always. Thank you, Dave. I also appreciate the bit you added about the preference of the winder. I think that's something that is often overlooked as people try to find the best and most accurate modern PAF replica. And this is referring to a comment I made when I compared the Montes to the OX4 PAFs. And whenever you talk to somebody like Matt at Montes or Mark at OX4 or anyone who really knows PAFs, John at Throwback as well, one thing they will say kind of before anything else is vintage PAFs varied hugely. And you can get vintage PAFs that are the best sounding thing you have ever heard. And you can also get vintage PAFs that sound like absolute crap. So it completely depends on the wind, the magnet choice, the offset between the coil. There are so many different factors in vintage PAFs, and if you take two modern PAFs from completely separate companies and compare them, you will probably get less difference than two original PAFs. That's the truth of it. They varied in spec and sound massively. But also, the comment I was referring to there, it completely depends on the preference of the winder and where they come from in terms of their musical taste as to which sort of PAF sound they will want to kind of copy, but also if they're basing their clone off a particular vintage PAF, how the original sounds. And it might sound completely different to somebody else who's cloning another PAF that sounds totally different, and you end up with two modern recreations that sound very different to each other, but they might be sonically identical to the vintage examples they were cloning. So there's so many different factors in it, and you're definitely splitting hairs when you start comparing really good modern PAF replicas. You will find differences between them, especially in price, but ultimately they all sound like PAFs, and they will sound closer to each other than most of the vintage originals sound to the other vintage originals. That's the truth of it. GTR Man. Wow, that thing looks amazing. What a wood grain. And with the body being 200 years old, I guess it had plenty of time to dry out. It sounds terrific too. So this is talking about the Ron Kern Barnbuster. And I was reading an article, I think it was one that Ron himself wrote, and he was talking about aging of wood and why vintage guitars tend to sound, not always, but tend to sound more resonant than modern guitars, even played unplugged. And one theory is, yes, it dries out, and it's very easy to take a wet piece of wood and turn it into a dry piece of wood over the space of a few weeks. But over the years, the moisture content of the wood continues to go down. So old guitars are drier in terms of their moisture content than modern guitars. But the other thing that I never realised, it's the sap in the wood as well, the gooey bits like within the fibres of the wood. They take sort of 50 to 60 years to harden. And when it's kind of soft and mushy in the wood grain, it will kind of absorb vibrations. And when it's kind of hard and crystallised, it will transmit vibration. So that's another theory on why older guitars tend to sound a bit kind of more acoustically pleasing when played unplugged than modern guitars, is because all of the sap in the wood has had time to harden, which happens over many, many decades. So yes, a 200-year-old piece of wood for the body, everything is very dry and very hard in that, and that guitar is one of the most resonant I've ever played. Unplugged, plugged in, whatever you do with it, it sounds absolutely godly. Wild/2003. Too bad the tone won't be as good because the magnet and wood spacers are backwards since it's on a left-handed guitar. They'll have to wind it the opposite way and cut the wood to the opposite end. Now this is talking about, again, the throwback SLE 101s in my guitar because I'm left-handed. The honest truth of it is they are completely symmetrical components. Humbucker pickups, almost, I'm sure there will be a few that aren't, but your standard humbucker is a completely symmetrical component. The wood spacer is exactly the same one end to the other. If you turn the whole pickup 180 degrees, the magnet kind of field is still exactly the same because you're just turning it 180. If you were turning it the other way, or 90 degrees or 45, yes, that would make a difference, but 180, it will be exactly the same. There are times as a left-handed player I do have to be aware of buying left-handed pickups. Strat pickups, for example, and telly bridge pickups that have a stagger to the pole pieces, I have to buy a left-handed stagger pickup. But with humbuckers, they sound exactly the same in a left-handed guitar as they do to a right. If you want to add your own stagger, you can adjust the pole screws and sort of dial in your own stagger to match a certain set of strings. But if everything is left kind of flush as it is from the factory, they will sound exactly the same. Prashant Gopal. What do you think when it comes to uploading pre-recorded songs? What if you upload an MP3? Would that be downgraded? How about a rip of a vinyl record? And this is the video I made all about YouTube compression, and kind of in response to people commenting on demo videos going, I've got no idea what this amp sounds like because YouTube compression. And it's one of those things that kind of gets thrown about and nobody's ever that sure exactly what it means or how much of a problem it is or isn't. So I made a video looking into it. Basically, to answer your question, Prashant, when you upload anything to YouTube, it is encoded by YouTube for optimized playback and to reduce the file size down. So whatever you upload will have encoding applied to it. So the higher quality you can upload in, it will still be brought down, but if it doesn't have other encoding on there, such as if you're uploading an MP3, that's encoded already, and then you get another layer of encoding on top of it. And the more you sample something and reduce the bit rate and the sample rate, the more rubbish the quality is, basically. So a 24-bit WAV file of a song compared to an MP3 of that song, both uploaded to YouTube, in theory, the MP3 will sound worse or lower quality playing back than the 24-bit WAV will, even though it's had exactly the same encoding applied to it. So always upload in the highest quality you can, basically. In terms of a vinyl rip, still, if you upload that in FLAC format or whatever the highest quality is nowadays, it will still be encoded and it will still play back at kind of iTunes levels of quality. So you're only really listening to a sort of MP3 of your vinyl rip, even if it's uploaded in crazy, crazy quality. But to be honest, streaming off YouTube, it's absolutely fine most of the time. If I listen to a vinyl rip of an album on YouTube, very rarely am I listening to that thinking that's terrible quality. And if I am, it's usually down to how it's been recorded and the stylus they're using and the conversion software they've used on their computer rather than the YouTube encoding. YouTube encoding is absolutely ample for 99% of circumstances, if not more. Aaron Sutton, curious to see what his Mark 1.5 sounds like. You don't have one, do you? And this is the Williams Audio Mark II Tonebender that's been newly fitted with some OC81D Mullard transistors, and it's now sounding absolutely ridiculous. Funny you should say that. I've just ordered a 1.5 from Nick. So a few weeks ago, I went onto his website and I bought one, and it's now in the process of going up the waiting list and being built. So hopefully, and I know what Nick's waiting list is like at the moment, a few weeks, a few months, whatever it ends up being, there will be a Mark 1.5 Tonebender on the channel. And then here I'll have the Mark 1, 1.5, 2 and 3. So I dare say there will be a newly revised which Tonebender is your favourite type video coming once that pedal lands as well. But yes, the 1.5 is on the way. It's the one Tonebender I don't own currently. Who is Michael Moschos? Great sounding Mark II. Owning a Solar/DAM reissue, I can assure you that yours sounds like a good one should. Thanks for your videos, mate. Well, thank you, Michael Moschos, I assume. Yes, this is now sounding incredible. It sounded great before, and as I said in that video, Nick's standard Mark II Tonebender, it still contains ridiculously posh components like 1960s new old stock metal can Mullard red dot transistors that literally any other pedal manufacturer would consider the holy grail of the transistors, but not for Nick. The OC81Ds are better, and they do sound a little bit different. They're not night and day different, but they do sound different to what was in there before. I think there's a little bit more cut, a little bit more harmonic richness now. And I am preferring how this sounds. There will undoubtedly be some confirmation bias in that, and I want to prefer the posher vintage correct transistor. There will definitely be an element of that for sure. But this sounds incredible. I've used this in a video as well today, and it's just sounding insanely good. Lou Welch. Joe, did you find the same headroom issue occurred if you ran the camouflage before gain pedals? Yes, definitely. And this is the quirk of the Thorpe camouflage, that the headroom isn't as high as you might want it to be. Even plugging the guitar directly into the camouflage and the camouflage directly into the amp, if you hit the guitar, and we're talking vintage spec guitars here, we're not talking 18K crazy humbuckers, if you hit the guitar even remotely hard, the sound will crunch up. It's an unfortunate quirk of the design of that pedal. Thorpe said the new old stock and the modern production chips both crunch up. There's nothing they can do about that. I would hope that I could beg to differ on that, because I've played other similar flanges that don't have the same headroom issue, but we'll let that go. Yeah, so if any pedal before it, if you're running the camouflage into an overdrive pedal, the overdrive pedal smashing the signal up will hide the sound of that clipping to a point, but it will still be there. And if you're putting extra harmonic content into the camouflage, or especially extra level, it will make the clipping worse. So yes, whichever way you use it, it will crunch up. Sadly, it's just what that pedal does, which is a real shame, because there was so much about that pedal that was just astonishingly next level good. But that headroom issue meant it went straight on eBay, and it now belongs to somebody else, which is a real shame, because it's a great pedal aside from that. And finally this month, the Cleaner 6969. And this is on a video talking about speakers in guitar cabinets. I always like to put subs in my cab so the bass player knows who's in charge. That really made me laugh, that comment, so thank you for leaving it. And yes, I've annoyed many a bass player in my time by playing too loud and too bassy. So there we are, folks. Those are all your questions. Well, not all of them, but a lot of your selected questions for September. Any other questions, drop them under this video or any of the videos in the next month, and I'll feature the most kind of relevant to the most people and the most interesting in the October Q&A. What's coming in October? Let's see. The next video in the Rickenbacker mod series is coming. That's taking the stock Rickenbacker bridge and swapping it out for the Mastery bridge, which is very subtle in terms of the tonal effects, but I think that's partly the point, which I'll explain in that video. I shot a video this morning, hence why I'm wearing a Dr. Z t-shirt, of the Dr. Z Z-Rec and the Dr. Z Z-Master, kind of the Brad Paisley and the Joe Walsh amp running together cranked. So even with ear protection in, I think I'm still mostly deaf, and I'm surprised the wall hasn't fallen down. It was ridiculously loud, but the tones were astonishing. And we also have another PastFX pedal coming this month. Another new one. Not sure if it's on the market just yet, but this one's a lot of interest about, so definitely tune in for that one. So there we are, folks. I love doing these Q&As, and from what I can tell, you guys enjoy watching them and getting involved in the comment section. So thank you for all your engagement throughout the last month. So thanks for watching, folks. Please do carry on subscribing. I always say it, but it makes a big difference when you hit subscribe. And I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.